Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Rapp, and I work in the Office of Alumni Relations at Northeastern, and I organize career programs. I oversee the NUSource networking platform, and I do some alumni career coaching as well. And I'm excited to have you here today because I think this is always a topic on people's minds. It's like, what's going on the other side of the wall? What are recruiters thinking? What are they looking for? What are they like? What's on their minds? So today we'll be getting those insights, and we will leave a lot of time for you to ask questions after the initial presentation part. I'm very excited to have our two speakers. Unfortunately, Gina Guglielmi became ill a couple of days ago and was regretting that she couldn't join us today. Very happy to have alumnus Frank Green with us today. He is co-founder and president of ExecuSource, and he's based in Atlanta. And my friend David Fernandez, who is a principal technical recruiter with Atelio, and he's based in Seattle. So thank you both for joining us. And I wanted to ask you to both start by just sharing a little bit about your backgrounds and your recruiting backgrounds as well.
Sure. David, do you want to start?
Sure. Yep. So my name is David Fernandez. I am currently at a company called Atelio, where I'm a principal technical recruiter, as Michelle noted. But I've been in recruiting now as a corporate recruiter for the last 14 years. And I've had my fair share of experiences working at HubSpot, a company which you might all be familiar with if you're from the Boston area. Before then, after that, I went to Wayfair, another Boston company that you may be familiar with, and I've done stints also at Amazon and Google for 2.5 years, where I hired executives, and in particular, like technical executives. So that's been my experience, and I hope that what I have to share with you today will help you understand a little bit and demystify some of what happens in corporate recruiting.
Great. And my name's Frank Green. I graduated from Northeastern in 1992, and I got into the recruiting industry almost immediately after graduating, and have had the opportunity to place thousands of candidates in a variety of different corporations, both locally in Boston initially when I first started my recruiting career, and then nationally now. My company actually has 7 offices across the U.S. We help people in accounting, finance, information technology, and healthcare, as well as engineering, staffing, and recruiting. So like David, I've been in the recruiting industry for quite a while, but I'm on the other side of the fence, so to speak. I'm on the outside placing people within corporations, where David is within a corporation pulling people from the outside to his company. So I have a wide knowledge base, I hope, of scope, industry, and location, and really excited to see if I can be helpful to all of you today.
Great, thank you. Well, I wanted to ask you first what you wish candidates understood about this mysterious hiring process.
It's not easy, and I mean that from my own perspective as a professional within the recruiting industry. I'd like to share that as a job seeker or someone who is a prospective candidate for somewhere, I realize it's not an easy process and can be challenging both emotionally as well as logistically in a variety of ways, which is why I do what I do, is to truly help people through that process, because it is daunting and can be challenging, and again, emotionally wearing. So I feel like when someone is considering something new, pack your patience, I believe, is imperative. Because it can be a long process, and as I've said now the third time, emotionally draining. So it's imperative, I think, to make certain that you're taking care of yourself and your mind is in the right place while you're looking, because you have to be at your best. Each interviewer wants to meet somebody who's excited, enthusiastic, and appropriate for the roles they have available. And that's your work, is to make certain that you are that person when you appear in a conversation, both on a camera or in front of someone. And that's a challenge. And I realize that. And I think it's important to realize that you really need to take care of yourself in your mental space while you're looking for a role. That's one of the things I see is most challenging for people over the years.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the same sentiments. And I would say there's added challenge both on both sides, on the job seeker side and on the recruiter side, even when there are two different sides of recruiting, like the
Yeah.
agency side and the corporate side. And that distraction, I think, comes in the form of LinkedIn. It's a super helpful tool. It can be very distracting. So if there's one bit of sort of like advice that I want to take myself all the time, I have to remind myself to take, and that I also give, is just to make sure that you try to understand what you want out of your life, like what your life philosophy is, and then what your work philosophy is. It's really easy to do the comparison game. We don't want to think of LinkedIn as like another social media platform akin to, say, an Instagram or a TikTok or a Facebook, but it is. And so it's easy to fall into that trap of like, oh, I see that my former colleague, my best friend, has recently been promoted, recently gotten a job. And that's it sort of like dovetails into this taking care of yourself, and also taking a step back to say, okay, what does my life require? What are my ambitions? Really becoming clear about that. And, sort of like the spoiler alert here is that the clearer you become about that, when you actually do get on a call with a recruiter, you're able to speak a little bit more sort of with conviction, like you've given it thought about what it is that you're really looking for.
Reminded me, the three of us, when we met earlier this week, we started a conversation about mindset. Neither of you say some things about, your ideas about mindset, how to manage your mindset.
Again, a challenging question, right? We all have different places there, but I agree with David. It's starting off knowing what's important to you, not only what's important to you, but how that fits in your life, so that you can consider positions that are going to fit for you, and in organizations that are their goals and their not interest, but sort of their objectives parallel those of your own. And I think that when you start with that mindset, you'll find that the organizations that you're looking at will be probably a little bit closer to what you want, and hopefully you'll be closer to what they want. That being said, it's important to not take it serious. I'm not, well, you have to take it seriously, but not personally. Rejection from an employer or corporation is not something that, and I understand this, when you're looking for something, it can be a real challenge, but it shouldn't be taken personally, because they certainly don't mean it personally. There are so many candidates for every one job that if you're not the selected one, it just wasn't the right thing. It's not necessarily you. So I think that's really important, to not take it personally. And it's so hard. It's an easy thing to say, and it's a hard thing to do. However, and as David said earlier, the next conversation you have, we find that residual negativity or feelings of inadequacy will show up in your next interview and will be a detriment to you. So it's very hard to do it, but it's imperative to guard against your your mindset. I know and again, it's challenging. I personally get into habits and routines that I just follow every day, regardless of what mood I'm in, to help me stay successful in that. And particularly when you're and some folks on here may be unemployed, that's really important to you. It's the people who are unemployed. You have to structure your life a bit so that it still has some level of continuity and predictability and routine, because that will help you, believe it or not, maintain your mindset. And I only say this, look, I'm not an expert in psychology, but I have been helping people find jobs this is my 34th year. So I've seen it up front, and it's really important to take care of yourself. So, David, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think all of those things are key, and I completely agree. And I would only add to that it's also important to surround yourself with people that you trust and can give you an accurate picture of who you are. Because I think just like anything else, it's very easy to sort of just get carried away and not have an accurate idea, especially when you're on maybe your third rejection or fourth rejection, or you've applied to the market's we're in a very interesting time right now. It's not a great market, and so you can apply to 10, 15 jobs, and we can talk about tactics later on about how to get someone to respond, or if that's even possible. But the reality is that oftentimes you won't get a response, or you'll get a rejection. And it's really easy to turn inward and be like, am I who I think I am? Do I have the skills that I think I have? Should I bolster my skills in this way or another? And before you actually go into that, I think in keeping with this theme of like having the right mindset, having like a group of people that you can go to that will remind you what you're really good at, what you're developing, what are your areas. If you have a mentor, I've had mentors in the past that you haven't talked to in a little while, reach out to them. Michelle can attest to this. We had a relationship where she was my career counselor many years ago, probably about 14 years ago. And I have reached out to her recently, and I've reached out to her before. And I think people like that can remind you where your strengths lie, and sort of guard against, as Frank put it, guard against sort of like going down this rabbit hole of negativity.
Perfect. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Having objective mentors and folks around you are really helpful, because also when you're considering what you're looking for, it's also helpful. I've found it's helpful for me to share that with the people close to me, to say, well, geez, I'm thinking this. What do you think? And I said, well, geez, Frank, are you kidding me? That's not going to work for you. Sometimes that feedback is helpful, because then you stop applying or looking at jobs just because. And I agree with David. We see so many people on LinkedIn now, and their friend or their best friend or their mother or their sister or something got this wonderful promotion. Now that they want to look for something new, just because they feel like they should. Don't fall into the trap. If it's your career, and you need to have something that's going to work for you. And sometimes objective feedback can only help you in that. But the people around you who you trust, I think, are imperative for sure. I'm glad you brought that up.
Excellent. And we had Joe and Corrine was recommending a talk, theperformersmindset.com, with Joe Town. That's helpful as well. So what makes a candidate stand out positively and get your interest?
I am definitely going to move. I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let David go with this one. I'm very interested in hearing myself.
Yeah. So what makes a candidate, ask that question again. I just want to make sure I'm pick up every aspect of it. There is nuance to it. What was the question again, Michelle?
Oh, sure. What makes a candidate stand out positively for you?
Oh, for me. Okay. I think for me, it honestly depends. It's the same actually if I talk to them, or if I see it on the paper. But I think very early on, if I'm looking at a resume, or if it's a sort of like a paper assessment that I'm making, whether this is sort of a positive fit or not a positive fit, I think at the very top of it, if you're having a summary, it should at least say something that is relevant, and that matches your skill set to the job description as it is. If it does that, then it just sends me a signal that you know why you're applying to this. You may not be the candidate that like I end up going for. Maybe I have like 500 resumes and 50 are really great, and you're in that 50, but by comparison, maybe I end up going with 2 or 3 others, but that still like reflects positively on you. Now, similarly, same thing. If I'm on a phone with you, or if I'm in a video conference like this with you, again, it's that like I will ask you questions that will help me draw out your sort of fit for the role. But a lot of times, how you come across really depends on how much homework you've done, not just on the company, but really on the actual role. I think that's hugely important. You'll find that I see a lot of folks that will quickly prepare for an interview by boning up on the company or something like that, which I think is fine. But when you get, I think, to the recruiter wants to at least know, I think, in terms of at the very initial outset, that you've read what the job is, you understand what it is, you've found what you can about how this job maps back to what your skill set is and what you've done in the past, and you're able to sort of help walk me through that if I ask you.
Absolutely. And I, for me, because of the way that my organization works, we're, talking to candidates for a variety of companies all the time. So we're also looking at people who may not be appropriate for particular positions we have at a certain moment, but whose experience is stellar, and we will proactively talk to our clients about them. And those types of folks tend to be those who show stability in the resume. And I know that's a challenging conversation, but over the last few years, I mean, I hate to say it, but companies pay me to find people for them, and they're looking for stability almost always. Stability as well as an obvious career progression. You started at one level, you move to the next level within the same company, hopefully at least once or twice, versus having to leave each company to move up. And I know, once again, that's a challenge because it depends on the organization you work for. But we need to see some level of success and forward movement within your career for us to get excited. In addition, and we talked about this too, it's attitude as well. It's the person who calls and sees us as a partner in their success versus I'm not a waiter, I'm taking an order from you. We're here to help you find something. So each person you speak to within the process of recruiting or being recruited is important, because you never know who you're speaking to. I always tell people to be absolutely polite and pleasant to everyone. It doesn't matter what the interaction is. If the person sends you a link to a Zoom call and it didn't work, don't yell at them or reprimand them. Just really always pleasant, polite, helpful. That's the way. Think of how you would like to be treated by the recruiter. You probably want to treat them the same way, is, I think, probably the best bet, for sure.
And you did that. The next question I did have was, I work with a lot of people who do have gaps on their resume, and this year we've seen more layoffs. Sometimes people have gotten fired or lost a job or wasn't a good fit, and those gaps on their resume. And sometimes it's caregiving. I've had some interesting caregiving situations. Do you have some strategies or some ideas about how best to present that on a resume so that you don't get weeded out?
I would defer. I'm gonna defer to you, Frank, on this, because I feel like,
Thank you so much.
yeah, you might actually get a lot of this. I get it too, but I think it's a little bit different because you're actually pitching some of your candidates to various companies.
Absolutely. And we do see it. I think that when it's on the resume, if there's a gap, it's always a red flag. I'm sorry to say, but most hiring authorities will say, "What's up with this?" Get ahead of it and explain it if you're having a conversation. The challenge for us is being able to take that resume with a gap and be able to have a conversation, because many times people will put it aside. So it's if you do have caregiving, actually, strangely enough, and I think positively from my perspective, is a very acceptable excuse that I hear. Most of my clients are very understanding of the fact that someone may have had a sick parent, child, spouse, regardless of what it is, and they had to take time off to help that individual. That is much more acceptable to that, from my perspective, than I didn't like the job, so I quit and I didn't have anything else and I waited for 6 months. I mean, I don't want to be difficult, but that's a hard one for us to speak to people like David about. It doesn't necessarily lean toward what our hiring authorities want to hear. So I think a conversation or an explanation is always important. And the other thing, the other challenge that we find is people will say they're laid off. Now, layoff is a very different thing. Layoff due to lack of work and a company laying you off is not being fired for not doing your job. So keep that in mind. If a company looks into the fact that you said you were laid off from Meta and they can see that, great. But if it's with a booming organization and you say you were laid off and they're killing it, there's cause for concern about your level of integrity. So also be very careful about the words you use when you're explaining it, but please do explain it. That's my take, and that's the way we typically counsel our candidates to handle it. Now, how would that be received by you, David?
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. I think having an explanation for it and having a succinct explanation for it, and I think when I've worked with agency recruiters, really great agency recruiters, if they sort of trust you, believe you, and you have a really great background, they'll work with you on honing that story, right? So that I mean, obviously they'll test you for that story first, and if it's a a good reason, right, a good excuse for having had a gap, then they'll work with you on how to present yourself and make that succinct. So I would definitely agree. One thing I have seen here and there is if you can, I haven't seen it with caregiving, but I've seen it with a few other different sort of reasons, like layoffs, for example, where someone will put in parentheses next to the company name, like, mass layoffs, or they'll put like, I imagine you could put like caregiving in parentheses. And that gives them sort of like a clue of like, hey, everything on this resume looks great. This one thing where there's this gap, it says due to caregiving, I'm still going to call this person and I'm going to ask them about this, right? So you still have to have the story succinctly ready and prepared. But I do think that sometimes having a call out on it on the resume says like, hey, it almost says ask me about it, right? Like just call me and ask me about it and I'll tell you about it.
Great point.
Excellent. So I think everyone's trying to figure out these applicant tracking systems. What does it mean for your resume? What should I be doing? Love to hear what's going on in that realm, and what should job seekers be aware of?
Gosh, I laugh about this. Frank, I don't know if you mind if I go first.
Please,
Yeah.
we're probably thinking along the same lines. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we might have different angles of it too, because I obviously, like, I've inherited various applicant tracking systems. Unlike Frank, you probably made the decision about which applicant tracking system you would use. And when you're hiring executives, you use it more as an information gathering and like sort of repository.
Yes.
To really get to know your clients over time and how many touches you've had with them and what they've been up to. And maybe you've placed multiple people or the same person at multiple places over 15, 20 years. Yep. For recruiters in-house, a little bit different, right? So I think a lot of, and this will explain what my smirk was about. A lot of what I hear is, oh, how do you game the ATS? How do you get it so that my resume pops up to the top and doesn't get weeded out? And I can tell you, as someone who's used Greenhouse, who's used Lever, who's used some homegrown systems at both Amazon and Google, and who currently uses Workday, these systems are not that sophisticated. And I think the bottom line that I try to tell folks is gaming the ATS is not the way to sort of like focus your efforts. Really, the way to focus your efforts, I think, is to ensure that the job that you're applying to and the resume that you're submitting really sort of speaks to that job you're applying to. And a lot of times that can be done in the summary. So I'm not saying that keywords aren't necessarily important, but a lot of folks, I think that what happens with ATS systems, at least in corporations, is much more sophisticated than it actually is. And to be frank, I think even though the technology is there to make them more sophisticated, I think the investment in applicant tracking systems at a company is going to not be the first place where they make huge AI investments. Like, I can't see, there wasn't anything in the books and in the plans, and I'm still in touch with folks that currently at Google to take their applicant tracking system and infuse it with AI. And I've actually heard stories at Amazon when they tried that and actually got pushback and had to like dial it back. So again, my whole sort of like bottom line here is focus more on speaking to the job that you're applying to in the summary and in your bullets. And don't worry so much about sort of gaming the applicant tracking system.
If I can add to that, and David, and I'm not going to disagree with you, but because of the way that my applicant tracking system works versus where, David's, it's a little bit different where we do actually search on keywords. So what I often will suggest to candidates is and I place a lot of folks in accounting. So if a particular role is for a controller and you need a CPA and international GAAP experience, I would say put that in your resume a few times in your summary, a professional controller level candidate who has international GAAP, or a CPA, using the words repetitively if possible, but not in a way that makes it look silly, of course. Because when my recruiters are actually looking for candidates, what we do is we formulate a search, and the top results always start with the people with the most keywords within that segment, unlike what David is talking about. And because of my business is employment, where Google's business is not employment, so we do make investment into our ATS because we have to. It's the main lifeblood of my organization. We know who we're placing, where candidates are coming from, and that sort of thing. So there is a piece of that, but I don't think it needs to be clownish. I mean, you don't want to just keep saying CPA, CPA, CPA. I've seen that actually, and it's like, are you kidding? Human will hopefully ultimately read it, but it is, I think, important to make sure that if there are particular skills that are asked for in the job description, that they are on your resume, if relevant. Obviously, we don't want to misrepresent ourselves.
And a tactic that you can use, that I have used myself and I see folks using, is you can take the job description, put it in ChatGPT, ask ChatGPT to give you the most emphasized keywords within that job description. You can also load into ChatGPT the summary of your resume, so you don't have to change all the bullets of your resume, and then ask ChatGPT to help you formulate or restructure your summary, your existing summary, to map back to the emphasis that's provided in the job description that you've just loaded. So there's ways to do that, right? There's ways to say like, hey, this particular job description for recruiter emphasizes executive recruitment versus technical recruitment. It emphasizes like stakeholder management versus sourcing, or vice versa. So you want to basically emphasize those things. So I think there are tactics and ways to actually represent yourself accurately, but actually emphasize the things that the job description is emphasizing. And I honestly would say, and I recommend this to everyone, because I think candidates spend a lot of time, for many reasons. Some I think are psychological, on honing their perfect resume. I do think I recommend coming up with a workflow, and that is time bound, like 10-minute or 15-minute workflow, where I use ChatGPT and the job description that I have to just sort of reformulate my summary, make sure that it matches the emphasis that's being placed in this job description, apply, next job, if that's what you're going to do. Now, I'm going to suggest and say, and I think Frank will agree with this, that applying to jobs is not the best. Like, just simply applying to jobs is probably not the best strategy. It never has been. But if you are focused on, optimizing for the ATS, then doing so in a quick way that is comprehensive, robust, and actually does what Frank is suggesting, right? Which is to say, like, hey, it actually does infuse my summary and my resume with the keywords that my staff is going to be searching on. Then I think that's the way to go.
And what a great idea. Seriously, that is, I pinpoint that, but that's a great idea of taking your summary and using ChatGPT to extract those components. I mean, or to add. I'm going to use that myself. I hope you haven't, licensed that.
No, I'm sure I'm not I'm sure there's a lot of people doing that, but it's really effective, because I think you want to be able to, if we're going into sort of like the tactics of applications, I would say that, like, you want to be able to customize your resume, but obviously you can't spend, some people do, but you shouldn't be spending hours and hours customizing it for each and every role that you apply to, in a way that just sort of starts to diminish the returns. Yes. So finding that balance of like, okay, what's my workflow? How long should it take? And is it repeatable? Basically creating a mechanism where you can just repeat this over and over again, and finding ways to test for its effectiveness. And, one way of doing that is to see like, hey, what is your like conversion rate on some of these applications? It's not going to be foolproof, because there are other variables to it, but I do think that's one way of sort of keeping an eye on whether your tactic is working.
And in terms of that workflow too, there are recommendations to spend about 75% or more of your time on networking, informational interviews,
yes,
people. So,
oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm like, this is a tactic, but it's definitely not an all, it's not even the most important thing. It's probably like somewhere in maybe the middle towards the bottom-ish, right?
Well, I want to give people a chance to ask some questions now, and then I still have more if we need them. And, I do welcome if people would like to turn on their cameras. It's kind of nice to see who's here, but we'll take questions from the chat. So feel free to throw some things in there.
I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
It's kind of like going back to the ATS sort of notion, and I don't know if you want to answer this, but how many resumes do you review organically before they're sent through a system, or is every resume that you review sent through something before you see it?
For me, it's every resume goes through our system. Everything comes through and is put into the system immediately. It's yeah, everything.
And will that like auto remove somebody from your viewing opportunity if ATS does not deem it like worthy?
No,
Okay.
it stays there. It stays there because we're constantly searching for different skill sets. And just because when we received an individual's resume, we may not have had anything appropriate at that point. That certainly doesn't mean that that's the case in the future. So typically when someone sends their resume to my company, for instance, we really do try to stay active with that particular person until they tell us not to. And they say, you know what, I've retired, or I don't want your help or something. We're almost always going to keep that resume. And it will still come up in searches as well.
And
Right.
just to add to that, I would say this is sort of back to the point that I mentioned earlier about the level of sophistication that the technology exists, but that for either investment reasons or for ethical reasons or compliance reasons hasn't happened yet. I don't know if this is what you're suggesting, but there are some people out there online that suggest like, hey, there's an AI, you put your resume through, there's 1,000 resumes in there, the AI just auto rejects the ones that don't match the keywords I've put in. Right, this really sophisticated thing that I'm sure the technology exists for, but I haven't heard of that happening. So what I wanted to sort of like say, at least on the corporate end, is there is human interaction with all the resumes, right? There are cases where we will filter out resumes. And I'll give you a perfect example. The job says it's in Bellevue, Seattle. I've got 1,000 resumes. The first thing I'm going to do is filter for resumes that aren't anywhere in Washington state and that aren't willing to relocate. So if they answered no in the questionnaire to relocation and their location is like not Washington state, then I will most likely not peruse those resumes with like a keen eye. I'll probably select them all and reject all of those resumes. So to be blunt, right? So that's sort of like, but it's still a human being and it's still manual in a lot of ways. So I just wanted to like highlight that because there's filtering and these sort of like older school ways. And then there's sort of this notion out there that like there's an AI agent sort of doing most of the work for you, which it probably can do, but might be illegal.
Right. I think
that was my experience just now. Like I had that happen to me. I rebutted the denial email and said, there's no way. And I was told there was a glitch. But that's why I just didn't understand that, wanted to know more, and that's why that question was prompted.
Yeah,
because that did happen to me. Like you said, it doesn't often. So I guess I'm the anomaly.
Yeah, no, and I think, well, let's hope you're the anomaly for now, because I'm fearful, honestly, that AI will start picking more of that up, and we will start seeing more of that sort of behavior and that sort of process, I should say. But we don't personally, and I don't think we will have a situation where we just reject resumes for having a machine do that, because there's so many variabilities on what we look for from candidates. So I don't see that happening for my company, but unfortunately, I could see that happening in the world at some stage.
I have a question.
Okay. Or actually, I was seeing Maxwell. I may not be seeing
Sarah.
yet.
Sarah has a question.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi, so I was in a career development seminar last Friday, specifically for people either in or looking to be in the career services industry. And one of the very first factoids that they put up on the screen was, and I may be off, so don't quote me, but it was to the effect of people coming out of college today will have approximately 12 different jobs by the time they become 34. And I remember it generated like a lot of like oohs and ahs and a lot of, fruitful conversation after that. And that seems to contradict completely what you were saying before, Frank, where your clients specifically are looking for stability. So I just didn't know if you had an opinion on that factoid.
I can see it. I can understand. And let me, and if I can I should probably qualify that comment. We see more change and more acceptable movement within the technology space. And David, certainly you're the guy, you're the person to talk about that. But we usually will see that because people will go on contracts for a certain amount of time, develop a particular piece of software, and then move on to their next project, perhaps, or they'll see that internally. So technology is the only one where we have a little bit more flexibility. But with some of the more traditional industries, as I mentioned to you, I place folks in accounting and healthcare and engineering. We actually do see clients who they'll literally say, if someone has had more than 2 jobs in the last 5 years, I don't want to see them. So again, I'm not arguing with you. I have a feeling that you may be right. I'm just saying that the clients that I work with do demand that from us, typically.
Hey,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Maxwell.
Hi, thanks for talking to us tonight. Well, tonight in my time zone, sorry. So you both mentioned, I just have a quick question. So you both mentioned sort of speaking to like making sure that the job sort of speaks to you. And I've agreed with a lot of the points that you made. I had a question that came to me. I wonder what your thoughts are on, for example, job descriptions that have very large lists of requirements that sometimes are maybe a little intimidating, even for entry-level roles, say, maybe for, an executive, like, yes, they should have a bunch of experience and all sort of fields, but I'm wondering how much of an overlap do you think there should be between your experiences and like what's on the job description? Because I know sometimes like it's not always, you have to have every single bullet point, for example.
I'm laughing because and David, boy, we're probably never going to work together now, because I'm just going to tell you the truth. Whenever I get a job description, I usually throw it aside and I say to my client, what do you really want? Seriously, do we really need someone? Because the job description would go, part of it is legality. Keep that in mind, where we have to talk about somebody who can pick up 10 to 15 pounds and all these sorts of things, sitting for X amount of time. Those are just structural and they have to be there. But in all actuality, most hiring managers that I know typically have 2 or 3 agenda points and a goal that they really want to see for the person. So my job is to pull that out of the individual, so that I can tell you, my candidate, what the person is really looking for, versus this list of, I always say it's almost like a petulant child. I get these things, it's like Santa's list at Christmas time where they want everything. Like, this doesn't exist. So I understand exactly how you feel. It can be extremely daunting when you're looking for a position and you get, it only requires 2 years of experience and it has like 50 criteria. You're like, how would I even gain that? So I completely understand. I honestly don't have a great answer for you when you're going directly to a company, but I know for me, if you're working with a recruiter or an outside recruiting firm, they should know what the client or the company really wants and what's very important in that job description. They should have been able to filter that out so that they can share it with you. So that's just my perspective.
Yeah, I would go on and say the first thing I would just sort of encourage you to do is, if you meet most of the requirements, apply, right? Reach out to someone, network, even better, right? Apply and then reach out to someone, get a referral. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I agree with Frank. I think I've seen it. I've worked with hiring managers at really sort of stringent organizations like Google, where they make you really write a leveling rationale for how the work is being done today, why you need someone to do this role now, what level, what's the justification for that level. And then I've also worked in most of the organizations I've worked at, it's sort of a hit or miss, right? It depends, right? Like the hiring manager will just list the laundry list of all the ideal things they ever wanted for this candidate. And to Frank's point, I think in recruiting, it's called the purple squirrel. I've heard it called like a bunch of different things, but that person doesn't exist, right? Like in the world, or maybe one of them exists in the world. And then I've also seen, sadly, in corporations, a sort of like lazy job description, which is It's mostly built out by Workday, based on like the job profiles that have been preloaded into Workday. Someone a long time ago figured out like this is what this level represents, and you should have these as the minimum requirements, and this is in compliance with US law. So it must have a bachelor's degree, must have at least 2 years experience doing X, Y, or Z. So you're going to see them all. So basically what I'm saying is you're going to see a bunch of different things. Don't let that sort of prevent you from applying. The other thing is, back to the tactics, is there are, and this was before ChatGPT, if you had a keen eye and you were really like, hey, I'm really interested in this particular type of work, this is sort of like something I'm passionate about, there are ways to sort of like pick out sometimes what those 2, 3, 4 things that actually matter to the hiring manager are from a job description, right? Like, it's not going to be like excellent written and verbal communication skills, because that's in every single job description. It's not going to be like must have bachelor's degree, because that's in every single job description. But somewhere in there, maybe it's in the sort of like preamble to the requirements, maybe it's in the requirements themselves, something's going to stick out. Now you can use ChatGPT and have it point out to you what's sticking out in that job description to give you a theme. And, the spoiler alert is that theme is what the hiring manager cares about and what they're going to ask you about if you ever get on a call with them. So just some things to think about from a tactic perspective.
Excellent. Anna.
Hi. This is all really, really helpful information. I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the gaps on resumes. In your experience, are those time bound when folks are concerned about that? And I speak as someone who has enough experience that I don't put everything on my resume. I don't put every job on there. So there are places where it might look like it's a gap. It's that I'm not including things that I think are relevant for the job that I'm applying for now. So is that the wrong approach? Should I be listing every position I had, or do you find that employers, as long as you've been consistent for 10 years, 15 years, they're not going to look as far back? I just like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are two, if I can answer sort of the two things that pop up in my mind, first of all, are time-wise. If there's any sort of certification you have that lapses if you haven't engaged in the activity for a while, whether it be in the medical field or in nursing, accounting, those types of things where you have to have CPE credits to constantly be up, that's important for you to know. So if someone wants a current CPA, you've been out of the workforce perhaps for 2 or 3 years, you don't have the appropriate credits, you're probably not your CPA may no longer be intact. So that, there are those gaps that will kind of be really career issues if they're not explained or if you don't keep up with that. But that's almost easy. It's the second thing is where it's someone like yours. I'm thinking of my resume. I've been, in the same business for 30 plus years, but there are 2 companies that aren't on my resume because I was there for a short amount of time and they rolled into something else. And I don't think that I'm misrepresenting anyone. I'm happy to tell anybody that, but the gaps are in the dates. It's obvious, but I don't bring it up because it was 20 years ago. Who cares, right? So I think that if you have the experience to show that you're professional in the organization or in the career that you have, it's probably not as important. I find it's much more challenging with people who are more junior in their career. Someone who's maybe on their second, third job out of, university. That's where it's like, that's strange. I mean, because I think that many of our hiring folks realize that life goes, we all have challenges. We have children or we have sick relatives or things happen and things occur that may cause a gap. But it's when you're right out of school and you have strange gaps, that's where it's like, that doesn't really make sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the first thing that pops into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I think, I don't think I have anything to add, actually, Frank. I completely agree.
Great. And let's go to Johnny.
Yes, hi, thank you. I second the fact that this has been incredibly helpful. I know that you guys mentioned towards the end that, 70% of your time or somewhere there should be spent on networking and like attending information sessions. I just wanted to know if you have any tips on finding those information sessions. Personally, I've struggled to find information sessions, don't know where to look, if it's like website or via LinkedIn. I've done a lot of like cold networking on LinkedIn that just like, I would say 90% of the time falls flat and I don't get any response. So any tips that you have there on finding those information sessions would be helpful.
Right. I can share with you one of the things that I found interesting is literally is the Northeastern NU source I found to be incredibly helpful because, and I don't know if you've looked at it, but definitely check it out. And I've actually had a lot of good feedback. So I personally am reaching out to individuals within, I'm relocating personally back to Boston from Atlanta, although my company has, an office there. So, and to re-engage with the local Boston business community, what I've done is go, I mean, basically I'm doing what you would do as a job seeker for myself to further my career. And I've gone onto NU Source and I'm connecting with individuals that graduated from Northeastern that are within the same sort of world that I'm in and saying, hey, I'm moving back to, Boston. You've got a fascinating resume or a great background. Can you spare 5 minutes to talk to me? And I found, I would tell you 75 to 80% of the people get back to me and have a conversation. Some don't because they don't even look at it because they may not have logged in. Gosh knows, they set up a profile and that was it. But I have used that as my number one source. Also, networking events within particular trades and career segments. So I don't know which city you're in, but there are almost always professional level organizations with most career centers. So there'll be healthcare associations. I'm in Georgia Society of CPAs, Massachusetts Society of CPAs. All of those organizations have some level of networking. I don't know if it would be informational at the same level, but definitely networking, because connecting one person to the next is the way that I've had success and way I encourage people to succeed is finding people who are swimming in the pond that you want to be in and getting to know them.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is this is very, there's an old school thing that has been working forever, and I think it just will continue to work. And that is when you reach out to someone, whether it's via LinkedIn, to ask them if they know of anyone else that they can connect you with. I mean, literally, it's every job I've ever gotten, I think, since graduating college has been, other than maybe the first one, has been done through what I think is called the strength of weak ties. I forget who the author is that wrote that book years and years ago. But I would definitely mine outside of just sort of information sessions. I would actually mine some of the people you're connected to, especially some of the folks that maybe you weren't like, best friends with them, or, these sort of like loose and weak ties. Actually reach out to them, ask them if they have a few minutes, talk to them about what they currently do that you're interested in. Obviously it has to be something that you're interested in, and make it less about, hey, can you refer me? Less about like, hey, do you have a job for me? And more about like, I'm curious, I just want to learn, and have them, ply them with questions, really bring your curiosity to it. And at the end, the best thing to ask for isn't a referral. It's, hey, is there anyone else? Is there anyone else that you think I should talk to? Anyone that's like interested in some of the same things that you're interested, that I'm interested in, because I'm really, really looking to break into this or to extend my career and grow it in this direction or this direction. So that would be my advice. And yeah, it's very old school, but I feel like this is one of those things that I don't think there's an AI for, and there won't be one, honestly.
Right. David, that is seriously one of the best suggestions that I think that anyone listening that we can get. I mean, it's that question adds so much more to the process. And so I'm glad you suggested it, because I completely forgot myself. So thank you.
It's like probably it's because it's low hanging fruit to us. Like we just think we just do it automatically. Yeah,
exactly.
It dawned on me. I was like, I ask that question all the time. I mean,
Right.
Michelle, you connected me with Patrick, over at UW. It's like one of those things where this is how I and how I see my peers like function as well.
Yep.
And remember, you can be helpful to the person you're asking those things of too. Like a lot of people have asked me, is there a way I can be helpful to you in return for your help?
Yeah.
100%.
Mahendra, you've been waiting patiently.
Firstly, I would like to really show my sincere appreciation to you, David, Frank, and Michelle for making this coming true for us to give this precious opportunity to seek a lot from you all, such as veterans in the industry. A quick background about myself. I graduated from Northeastern in the year 2016 with a master's in engineering. Later, I worked for 3 years in
Mahendra, just
Boston.
in the interest of time, can I ask you to just tell
Yeah.
us the question, please?
Yeah. So my question is, actually, COVID was a big breakthrough for many of us, and because of which it happened for me to come out of US, and now I'm also working hard to upskill myself and also find my foot back. Most of the times, because of the sponsorship, my profile won't be selected compared to the other available. So in this case, since you are like the stalwarts in the industry, I would like to seek from you what best I can improvise in that context.
That's a tough one in some ways. For sure, because we have found that, and David is, and I'm not even trying to punt quickly, but he is definitely going to be perhaps a better resource here. But we have found that our clients who were open to sponsoring individuals in the past, we've seen that dry up a bit. So I definitely I can understand your frustration, because we've definitely seen that scale back significantly in the last few years, but. David, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I think I agree. I think it's scaled back. I think there's I think the reason this one's a tough one is because there is a lot out of your control in this particular thing, right? But I will say what's in your control is like making sure that you have a good awareness of the skill sets that are in demand, because those are the ones that both companies and the USCIS are fine to actually say, okay, we're going to approve this H-1B or this H-1B transfer, because you have this skill set and it's not as abundant as we would like it to be, and this company really needs it and they can make a case for it. The other thing you can control is just being mindful of companies that have the ability to actually do what you're asking them to do. And that's usually really big publicly traded companies for whom like sponsoring someone is no problem. If you're applying for like a startup and you have great data science skills, they just may not be able to afford whatever it costs to have like Fragaman, which is a big vendor law firm that does a lot of these H-1B transfers. They may not have the coffers to do that, right? They may be on Series A, they may be running out, trying to get Series B. So you want to go for companies like FIS or companies like like the big tech companies, but maybe other companies as well that are that can afford that and for whom that's like something that they do all the time. And I'll give you an example, like Atelio and FIS. I mean, we do probably dozens of H-1B transfers a month. So if the skill set's there, then that's not even a thought process for us. But I worked at HubSpot where that wasn't a thing. We just didn't do that. And now they're much more popular. I think they're, well-known company or whatever. Things are different now. But when I started there, it was a startup, and in some instances we didn't know if we would be able to like afford being a company, another year.
Right.
So.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Jenny.
Hi, yes, thank you. So my question was around pivoting to a kind of new role. So I was impacted by layoffs in tech earlier this year, and I wanted to use that opportunity to pivot into something a little bit different, but not very different. I have actually a recruiting background, but it was housed within recruiting operations. So I was looking for more dedicated ops roles. And I feel like I've done a lot to like try and move into that space. So highlighting transferable skills, getting referrals for roles, applying to companies where I have more direct experience, like with the software, the tools. So I wanted to hear if you had any advice for how to pivot in this market, because I feel like one of the challenges that I'm guessing is that maybe hiring managers feel like they don't want to take a chance on someone. So yeah.
I'm going to, this, unfortunately, this is an easy question for me, because of the fact that, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, when, and, you know, for us as an outside recruiting firm, our companies, our clients are looking for something very specific, and they're not frequently open to, well, here's someone who wants to make a change. Or I have a candidate who has the potential to do the role, although for me, that makes sense. And I certainly have clients who are open-minded in that way, but generally they're paying for a very specific skill set. And they are usually looking for someone who has done that job in company A, move them to company B. So I typically don't see, and I have conversations with folks like yourself frequently. We don't usually have a lot of success helping people pivot in their careers, because that's not what companies use us for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But and I don't know, David may have a thought on that.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think it's a hard, I don't have any, sort of like answers. And I think it would, most folks here, obviously you guys are really smart. So there's no full answer for this. It's like, this is going to solve your problem. But I have seen some success with peers, even myself, when I made a career transition into recruiting from something else. I had a career before this, is I would say, similar to the H-1B question, you have to target the places that would be open to taking a chance on someone that doesn't have the thing that because a company that's big, obviously, I mean, I'm going to use, like, I don't know, Amazon, right? Like if they want to hire expert in XYZ, they have a whole list of candidates that they can choose from, right? But there might be a company out there that would be willing to take a chance on someone smart. So that's the first thing I would say, is sort of target like companies that are sort of in the space of like, hey, they don't have a lot of money. They could use someone that's really smart. They could do this job and also a little bit of this job and this job. So leveraging some of the skills you currently have, while also giving you the opportunity to grow the skills of the job that you want. The other thing I would say,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I would say is, back to sort of the networking, is actually reaching out to those folks and not asking for a referral, not asking for a job, but in those companies, just asking like folks that do the job you want. Can you hop on a call with me? Tell me a little bit about like what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I'm just curious. I don't know if I want to make this career transition. I think I do. You're not going to ask for a referral. You're not going to ask them for a job. You just want to have a conversation with them. And when you approach it that way, people are like over the moon to be like, hey, here's what I hate about it. Here's what I love about it. You know what? Maybe I can connect you. Like, and then before you get off that call, hey, is there anyone else that's had experiences like you that you've worked with that I might be able to, and is there anything I can do for you, to Michelle's point? That's it. That's all I'll say. But I think that I've seen that work, but it's a long haul, and I think it's a journey. So if you're preparing yourself for that, and it sounds like you've already been on that journey, yeah, it's going to be a little while.
Yep. And I was going to say the same thing. Network with the people who have the role that you want, that you're targeting, and find out more from them. Get them to tell you. And people actually do enjoy helping out if you ask, which I find most of us are fearful of actually asking for that. But people do. I know I enjoy it. You know, it's geez, you have this role. This is something I'm interested in. Here's my background. Would you mind spending 20 minutes on the phone with me? Just talking to me about your experience and how you got there. Why wouldn't they? So.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
excellent advice. I'm going to take two questions. I know we're reaching the end, so we'll have to be brief. Hussein.
Hi David, hi Frank, and hi Michelle. Thank you for all your insights. I just had one question. Could you share your insights on the significance of applying to a job as soon as it is posted? Should I not bother applying once there are like 500 or 1,000 applicants to the job? Or should I just, because there are certain times when I see a job is posted, it's 24 hours and I see there are like 500 applicants, right? So, I mean, I don't understand if, my chances of getting a call back from the recruiter decreases, or should I just like not think about that a lot and just apply to it? to the job?
Good
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. My view is don't think about it. Just apply to the job. But also know that like applying to the job is literally the like sort of the least you could do in a way, right? You'll want to, I think, you know, what I've seen done before is, you know, obviously looking at anyone that you're connected to that might be at that place that you are applying to. If you feel like that job is going to be unposted relatively soon and you're really excited and eager about it, you know, don't ask for a referral yet or anything like that. Just apply to it and then reach out to people that you know at that company or anyone that might know someone at that company. And just ask to talk to them, or at the very least say, hey, listen, I applied for this job. I don't know if you'd be open to it, but you know, if you wouldn't mind putting in a good word, that would be fine. But that's sort of like dependent on the relationship that you have with the person. But I wouldn't overthink it. You know, it's there's so much information out there, and I appreciate the question, Hussein, because it's like sometimes you look at information online, and to stay within our context here, you know, you look at sort of LinkedIn and it says 500 applicants, you refresh it an hour later, it says 1,000 applicants. That information is pretty much useless. Like if you're interested in the job, just apply for it. Yeah. I mean, there's really nothing, you shouldn't let that dissuade you.
Yeah.
And if I can go back to what I was telling you earlier, as one of the previous questions, if you're sending your resume to my organization, it will stay in my database, and we are constantly mining the database for candidates. If your resume, you may not be appropriate for that particular role, but we'll never be able to consider you for anything in the future if you don't send the resume to us, right? So we love to have that so we can continue to think of you for other things. So and this is, and Michelle, you may never want me on another panel again after this, but truthfully, it's like dating. If you want to get married, just signing up for a match does not mean anything. You know, you can send a lot of profiles, but it doesn't mean that you're going to hit the one. I hate to sound that silly, but it's almost the same. I mean, there are just so many people, and those 1,000 people who applied, many of them are completely unqualified. They just see the job, like apply, apply, apply. You may be more qualified than the 300 other people. You just don't know. Just hit the button and move on.
Okay, last one is going to be from El Shechtman. Oh, El Shechtman, are you here?
I am here.
All right.
I'm sorry. I am here, and I'm showing my face. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is, I think, you're not gonna be able to help me with this because if I recall, I don't think you deal with this. But okay, so I'm older.
Challenge
and
accepted.
I have a lot of. What's that?
It's a challenge accepted.
Yes. Well, okay. So, and I didn't mean to be disrespect. I didn't mean to be disrespect by that. Okay, so
no, not at all.
I have a lot of work experience. I graduated from Northeastern 2 times. I have a bachelor's in leadership and a master's in education. I also went to BU in between and got a master's in advertising. Before that, I had a scholarship at Berklee College of Music. That's why I initially went up to Boston, but I'm here in San Antonio, Texas. I came back in 2013. My father passed away this year, and
You can kind of get to the question just because of our timing is tight.
Okay, yeah. So here's my question. You talk about people knowing what they want, but if you never really had an opportunity to know what you want or to get in somewhere, how would you really know? I could tell you all the skills that I have and things that I'm good at doing, and I can also tell you what I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm in an MBA program, and I'm hoping to get some mentorship, which I never really got in any of these places, I have to say. And so, I'm an older person. How am I supposed to, just apply or, network? How is it supposed to happen? How am I supposed to get into where I want to get in? What I want to do is be in a meeting, and I want to help make decisions. Now I'm doing, payroll, and I'm doing some stuff like this, and I'm finding a lot of issues with it, because I'm doing it, but I want to be making decisions. I want to help people. I want to do more. I'm very capable. I'm smart. And I feel like I'm just, when is it going to happen? I guess is the question. This might be other people in the same boat. I don't know, but that's my question.
Yeah.
I just flashed a book or a workbook that's part of a book written by these two professors at Stanford, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, called Designing Your Life.
Great book.
This is the workbook. There's an actual book, if you can see it. And the workbook literally is a workbook. So it actually, you're gonna have to set aside hours of time to work on it. And the first assignment is to write down, and you'll probably have to rewrite it, your life philosophy, and then separately, your work philosophy. And so what I'm advocating for here answers the first part of your question. It isn't the sort of like, which jobs do I apply for now to move on to something new and different that I end up enjoying. What I'm advocating for now is take the time and find guidance. And this is good guidance. I think this book is good guidance. Find some way that you can be guided to answering the deeper question of what it is you want. If you haven't had a chance to, because life's gotten in the way, that makes sense, right? Like that's just, you know, and a lot of times it sucks, but life gets in the way, and you know, you don't have that, you haven't set aside that time. But I would say I often find that if you can find good guides, books, coaches, people, it's very similar to going to the gym to try and get healthy by yourself versus being like, I don't actually know how to use these machines or in what order to use them in or how to properly do a deadlift so that I don't like get sciatica. So maybe what I'll do is I will reach out to a coach, or I will, you know, watch this video or take a class and maybe consistently take that class over and over and over and over again until I start to, you know, basically have a guide, someone that knows what they're doing, walk you through it. And it could be a book or it could be a person live. But that's what I would recommend to at least get at well, what the heck do I want to do? Because I think the life design part, notice it doesn't say design your career. Actually, career is a big part of it. So this book could be called that, but it's not called that. And I think they purposely didn't call it that because they're like, hey, there's other aspects of who you are that should inform what career that you end up pursuing.
Excellent. Anything to add, Frank?
No, I think, you know, it all makes sense. But one of the downsides, and, you know, and it's a great question, but I think the reason why David and I are talking about doing that work beforehand is because the person with whom you're speaking at the other end at a company, that's not their job to figure out your career for you. You have to come to them with a presentation of who you are and what you're good at and why you're appropriate for that role. So that's why it's imperative for you to really, and I get it. I get the challenge 100%. I go through it myself. I'm, you know, at a stage in my life where I'm maybe will transition in a few years. And those are challenging and daunting thoughts. But David and I aren't here to, we're not career, he might be, but I'm not a career counselor necessarily. Companies are paying me to check and make sure someone is appropriate for them. And so it's important for you to do that homework ahead of time. And using the same, I would do the same thing that he just suggested. So I'll be quiet now because basically I'm just talking.
Designing Your Life is a great book also. Thank you all for these great questions. Frank and David, you are a dynamic duo.
Thank you.
You're really
Thank you.
bringing like to do this like a well-chosen TV show here. It's really helpful. And I think you each brought different perspectives from the worlds that you're in both kind of the personal part of the life and sort of the reality of like, this is what employers are looking for. This is what matters to them. And just from all your expertise and experience, it's really helpful for all of us to just understand like what things look like on your end with the 500 resumes and the employers. And to all of you, there's a lot of challenges here. So I hope you found this conversation helpful, and we'll continue to have programs like this going into 2025. So thank you again, Frank and David, and thank you all for your participation.
Thank you for having us.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah.